Sergeant Olivia Harris clutched her boarding pass tightly, her weary eyes scanning the bustling terminal of Hampton International Airport. After 6 long months serving in Syria, she was finally heading home. The weight of her experiences pressed down on her shoulders, but a small smile played on her lips as she thought of seeing her family again. Now boarding first class for Flight 842 to Boston, a voice announced over the speakers, catching Olivia by surprise. She glanced at her ticket again, confirming that, yes, she indeed had a first-class seat. It had to be a mistake or maybe a last-minute upgrade, but she wasn't about to question her good fortune, as she made her way down the jet bridge. The sound of her military boots echoed off the walls. When she stepped onto the plane, the familiar scent of recycled air greeted her, and she couldn't help but notice the polished surfaces and plush seats of the first-class cabin. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," the flight attendant said warmly. "Your seat is 3B, just to your left." Olivia nodded, stowed her small backpack in the overhead compartment, and settled into the roomy seat, enjoying the comfort she wasn't used to after months of cramped military transport. As other passengers began to board, she closed her eyes, letting the hum of conversations and the rustle of luggage lull her into a rare moment of peace. "Excuse me," a sharp voice suddenly interrupted. Olivia's eyes flew open, and she saw a well-dressed man in his 50s standing in the aisle. His eyes scanned her uniform and the sergeant stripes on her sleeve with a look of disapproval. "I believe you're in my seat," he said, his tone dripping with indignation. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is my assigned seat," Olivia replied calmly, reaching for her boarding pass to confirm. The man's frown deepened, and his voice grew louder. "There must be some mistake." "This is first class," he said, his tone making it clear what he meant. Olivia felt a familiar. "I'm aware, sir," Olivia responded, handing him her boarding pass. "As you can see, I've been assigned seat 3B. The man snatched the ticket from her hand and scrutinized it, his eyes narrowing. A flight attendant approached, her professional smile unwavering. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, looking between Olivia and the man. "Yes, there certainly is," the man snapped. "This person claims to have a first-class ticket. Surely there's been some sort of mistake." The flight attendant glanced at Olivia's boarding pass and then back at the man. "Everything appears to be in order, sir. Sergeant Harris is indeed assigned to seat 3B. The man's face flushed with frustration. "This is unacceptable. I paid good money for this seat. And I won't have my flight ruined by—" "Sir," the flight attendant interrupted firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. Sergeant Harris has a valid ticket, and she has every right to be here. Now, please find your seat so we can prepare for takeoff." The man huffed, glaring at Olivia, before turning and stomping to his seat. Olivia exhaled deeply, willing her heart to slow down. She could feel the eyes of other passengers on her, a mix of curiosity and discomfort in their gazes. The flight attendant turned to Olivia, her expression softening. "I'm so sorry about that, Sergeant. Can I get you anything before we take off?" Olivia shook her head. "No, thank you. I'm fine." As the plane taxied toward the runway, Olivia stared out the window, replaying the confrontation in her mind. She had faced danger on the battlefield, yet somehow, this encounter left her feeling more rattled than any firefight. The engines roared to life, and the plane lifted into the sky. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Olivia allowed herself to relax slightly. The city below had faded into a blanket of clouds, and the cabin was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of a newspaper or the soft clink of glasses as the flight attendants moved through the aisle. She leaned back into her seat, staring blankly at the in-flight entertainment screen in front of her. "Would you like something to drink?" the flight attendant from earlier asked, her smile warm and genuine. Olivia hesitated for a moment before replying, "Just water, please." As the attendant handed her the glass, Olivia's attention was drawn to a faint sob coming from a few rows ahead. A woman, probably in her early 30s, sat hunched in her seat, her shoulders shaking as she tried to muffle her cries. Olivia frowned, torn between wanting to offer help and respecting the woman's privacy. The attendant moved past her, seemingly unaware of the woman's distress. Olivia sighed and set her glass aside, unable to shake the nagging feeling that she should do something. She had spent her career solving problems and protecting people, but this was different. This was personal and delicate. Taking a deep breath, Olivia unbuckled her seatbelt and walked quietly toward the woman. She kneeled down in the aisle beside her, speaking softly. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice you're upset. Are you all right?" The woman looked up, startled, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She hesitated before speaking. It's just been a rough day. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." Olivia shook her head gently. "You don't need to apologize. If there's anything I can do, I'd be happy to help." The woman wiped her tears with the back of her hand and took a shaky breath. "My name's Emily. I'm flying back to Jackson for my father's funeral. It's overwhelming, you know." Olivia's chest tightened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Emily. That's an incredibly hard thing to go through." Emily nodded, her lip quivering as she spoke. "Thank you. I guess I wasn't expecting it to hit me so hard during the flight." For a moment, the two women sat in silence, the hum of the plane filling the space between them. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice calm and steady. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but it's okay to grieve. And it's okay to ask for help if you need it." Emily looked at her, her gratitude clear in her expression. "I don't know what to say. I didn't expect anyone to even notice, let alone offer comfort. Thank you, really." Olivia gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just take it one step at a time." As Olivia returned to her seat, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, despite the earlier confrontation. Helping Emily reminded her of the importance of kindness, even when the world around you feels indifferent. The journey home, though still long, felt a little lighter. After settling back into her seat, Olivia tried to distract herself with the movie playing on the screen in front of her, but her mind kept wandering back to the woman she had just comforted. Emily's grief had stirred something deep within her, reminding her of the losses she had experienced over the years. Life had a way of catching you off guard, and sometimes it felt as though no amount of preparation could shield you from its blows. The flight continued smoothly, and the surrounding passengers seemed to settle into the rhythm of the journey. Some read quietly, while others dozed off, their heads resting against the windows. Olivia glanced out at the blanket of clouds below, lost in thought. Her peace was short-lived, though. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, his tone calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." A slight rumble began to shake the plane. The once steady hum of the engines was now accompanied by the unsettling sensation of the aircraft bouncing through pockets of rough air. Olivia tightened her seatbelt, instinctively gripping the armrests. Around her, she could sense the unease spreading. The passengers shifted uncomfortably, murmuring nervously as the turbulence intensified. She closed her eyes, taking deep breaths to steady herself. In moments like this, the fragility of life felt all too real. Suddenly, a loud gasp from a few rows ahead jolted her from her thoughts. It was Emily again, her face pale as she clutched the armrests, visibly shaken by the turbulence. Her fear was palpable, and for a moment, Olivia debated whether she should go to her. But before she could decide, the flight attendant hurried down the aisle, reassuring passengers that everything was under control. Olivia watched as the attendant knelt beside Emily, offering her a reassuring smile and a calm word. Gradually, Emily's breathing slowed, and she nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly. The sight of Emily finding some comfort eased Olivia's own nerves. As the turbulence began to subside, the passengers gradually relaxed, though an air of tension still lingered. Olivia exhaled deeply, releasing the tight grip she had maintained on her armrests. The rest of the flight passed uneventfully, and soon enough, the captain's voice returned to the intercom, announcing their descent into Jackson. Olivia glanced out the window, watching as the landscape below came into view, the city's lights twinkling against the evening sky. As they landed and the plane taxied to the gate, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It had been an emotionally taxing journey, but in some strange way, it had also reminded her of the importance of connection, even with strangers. Sometimes, the smallest gestures of kindness could make all the difference. As she stood to retrieve her bag from the overhead compartment, she caught a glimpse of Emily gathering her belongings a few rows ahead. Their eyes met briefly, and Emily gave her a small, grateful smile. Olivia nodded in return, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. As she stepped off the plane and into the terminal, Olivia knew that she would carry the memory of this flight with her for a long time. It wasn't the turbulence or the destination that stood out the most, it was the reminder that even in the midst of life's storms, a little kindness could help steer you through. As Olivia made her way through the bustling terminal, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within her during that flight. Airports were always places of transition, a gateway to new adventures or reunions, but today they felt like more than that. There was a deeper sense of connection that lingered, one that went beyond the usual routine of travel. She walked toward the baggage claim, the hum of the airport filling her ears. Travelers rushed past her, some hurrying to catch connecting flights, others searching for familiar faces among the crowd. Yet Olivia felt oddly detached from the chaos, her mind still replaying the moments from earlier, Emily's tear-streaked face. The turbulence that had rattled more than just the plane, and the small but meaningful exchange of comfort between them. As she stood by the carousel, waiting for her suitcase, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced down to see a message from her sister, who was supposed to pick her up, running a bit late. "Traffic is terrible. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Olivia sighed but texted back, "No worries, I'll wait." With some time to spare, she wandered over to a nearby coffee shop, ordering a cup of tea to settle her nerves. Taking a seat by the window, she watched people streaming in and out of the terminal, their faces full of anticipation or relief. There was something comforting in the collective experience of travel. Despite the anxiety it often brought, as she sipped her tea, Olivia thought back to Emily. She wondered if she would ever see her again. It was strange how two people could cross paths for just a few hours and yet leave such a lasting impression on each other. Life has a funny way of connecting people, even if just for a fleeting moment. After what felt like only a few minutes, her phone buzzed again. Her sister had arrived. Olivia gathered her things, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude as she made her way to the exit. The cool evening air hit. Her sister, Claire, waved from the car parked at the curb, a wide smile on her face. Olivia returned the smile, feeling the familiar warmth of family wash over her. She hadn't seen Claire in months, and despite the long day, she was looking forward to catching up. As she slid into the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt, Claire glanced over at her. "How was the flight?" Olivia paused for a moment, then smiled softly. It was unexpected. But in a good way. Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't push for more details. Instead, they fell into an easy conversation as they drove away from the airport, the city lights flickering in the distance. As they headed toward home, Olivia leaned back in her seat, watching the world blur by outside the window. She knew she wouldn't forget this journey, not because of the destination, but because of the simple act of reaching out to another person in need. Sometimes, it wasn't the grand gestures that left the deepest marks, it was the small, quiet moments of connection that made all the difference. And as the car wound through the streets of the city, Olivia couldn't help but feel that, in some way, she had been changed for the better. As the car rolled into the quiet suburbs of Alderwood, Olivia could feel a sense of calm washing over her. The familiar streets, the tree-lined avenues, and the cozy glow of porch lights in the early evening all reminded her that she was home. It had been a long day of travel, but somehow she felt more at peace than she had in a while. Claire turned into the driveway of the two-story brick house they'd both grown up in. It was the place where so many of their childhood memories were made, and now it holds a sense of comfort for them both. Olivia stepped out of the car, stretching her legs and taking in the cool air of the evening. "Still the same old place," Claire said with a chuckle as she opened the trunk to retrieve Olivia's suitcase. "Some things never change." Olivia smiled at that. "Yeah, some things don't. And that's not such a bad thing." They both headed toward the front door, with Claire still chatting about the latest neighborhood gossip. As they stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around Olivia like a familiar blanket. The scent of Claire's cooking from earlier lingered in the air, and the soft hum of the heater added to the homey atmosphere. They dropped Olivia's bags by the stairs, and she sank into the well-worn sofa, grateful to finally relax after a day of moving through airports and flights. Claire joined her, handing over a cup of tea. "You look like you've had quite the day," Claire said. Sipping from her own mug, Olivia let out a soft sigh, feeling the weight of the day settle over her. It was one of those days when you don't expect much, but then life throws you a curveball. "Oh." Claire tilted her head, curiosity clear in her eyes. "What happened?" Olivia took a moment, gathering her thoughts. "There was this woman on the flight, Emily. She was going through something really tough. And, well, we ended up talking. It's strange, you know. You don't think a stranger can make such an impact in just a few hours." Claire leaned in, clearly intrigued. "What did you talk about?" "We didn't say much, really. It was more about being there for each other. She was scared of the turbulence, but I think it was more than that. It reminded me that sometimes the simple act of offering someone comfort is more powerful than anything else." Claire smiled softly, her eyes understanding. "You've always been like that, Liv. You have a way of connecting with people, even when you least expect it." Olivia shrugged, her mind still replaying the moments from the flight. "I don't know if I did anything special. But it felt like something bigger than just a conversation. It felt like I was meant to be there. In that seat, at that moment." They sat in silence for a while, sipping their tea, both lost in thought. The world outside the window had grown dark, but inside the house, everything felt warm and safe. Olivia leaned back, feeling a quiet sense of contentment. As the night settled in, Olivia knew that the day had been more than just another flight. It had been a reminder of the small ways people could touch each other's lives, even for a brief time. And as she sat there, with her sister by her side, she felt grateful, not just for the journey that had brought her home, but for the unexpected connections that had made her day so much more meaningful. Sometimes, life's most profound moments come when you weren't even looking for them.